Hey everyone, welcome to our Banding Day live stream. We are streaming to you live from just outside Davis Hall, looking at the campanile behind us. My name is Sean Peterson. I am a graduate student in the Environmental Science Department of Environmental Science Policy and Management. And
I'm Lynn Schofield. I'm a biologist with the Institute for Bird Populations, and I study all sorts of things about the ecology of California.
So what we got, the video we got today is the banding video, which is available on YouTube. We have some commentary in there, although it's a little bit muffled due to our masks and the microphone quality, so we'll add subtitles at some point, but feel free to kind of enjoy the banding while we talk about it. But mostly we're going to kind of answering your questions about banding and kind of what the whole process is like.
Yeah, we'll talk through what's going on right now in the background in the banding video, and then we'll answer questions as we go. So right now in the video, just arrived is our expert bander and director of the Santa Cruz Predatory Birds Research Group, Zika Glux, whose hands you see there, and also accompanying her, helping to handle the chicks, make sure the adults do not harass her while she's present, is Sean Peterson himself.
Those are my hands right there on the right side.
All right. So
I guess very quickly, Lynn, do you want to tell us why we ban birds?
Why we ban birds? We ban birds for several reasons that we're going up here. There's quite a few studies that are going around nationally, internationally, and Bay Area wide, region wide, regarding falcon and other bird population health and the health of individuals. And it is important to be able to differentiate individuals through time to have an understanding of where birds are starting from and where they are born, where they're moving from, where they start nesting. It can help you determine the survival rate with a little bit of math and how often you happen to relocate banded birds. And then during the banding process, we're also taking measurements regarding the health of the chicks, which includes their size. An interesting fact that has been found about several species of birds around the world is that due to what appears to be changes in the climate, a lot of species have started to become smaller to help them deal with things like heat stress. And then later in this, you'll also see that a small sample of one of the feathers is taken, and that's to analyze whether there is mercury in the bird system. And yes, S.K. Pollock actually asked, why did they clip one feather and take down? And that is to analyze, you can do genetic analyses on these feathers, for one, and for two, you can get an idea of the mercury levels that the bird has been exposed to. And here we see Zika is measuring the bird's tarsus, is one of the first things they measure. The tarsus refers to the wrist of the bird, although it's actually, in fact,
yeah, it's the bone, the equivalent of these bones right here in a human. A bird's foot is really just our fingers, and then the first part of their leg that you see is actually all these bones fused together.
Yeah, and that's an important measurement to start with because it helps you determine exactly what size band the birds are going to use. And that tool there is the band size gauge to be able to double check exactly what that is. So let's...
And one of the major things that you get out of measuring the bird's leg is sex of the bird for falcons, peregrine falcons. So this kind of leads to our kind of big announcement for the day is that Annie and Grinnell have 3 boys this year. So all 3 chicks were boys. So they all are pretty small. They have pretty small legs, and we're kind of right there in that perfect size range to be males.
All right, so here's kind of an interesting question while we're mid here. So about the estimated length of life of falcons, because the estimated length of life a falcon can get, you know, up to something like 20 years of age. But most falcons really aren't able to get past that first year of their life because it's very difficult to learn to be a falcon, to learn to hunt, to learn to stay away from predators. So are unhatched eggs figured into the mortality? And they are not. And usually when mortality is calculated, it's sort of two separate numbers, and it's the number of birds that get to the fledging state. And then when we talk about mortality, we're talking about the number of birds leaving the nest and surviving from there.
Yeah, and
all right, so we can see right now in the video is Zika putting on the first band right now, which is a silver band. It's made of aluminum, and that has a 9-digit code on it that is unique to that bird. It differentiates it from every other bird in North America. And any data that's taken about this bird at the time of banding, including measurements, weight, again, the mercury levels, DNA, that will be associated with that band number.
So another question about the banding is, so we already introduced Zika and myself as the banders today. We did not wait until the parents were gone. What we did wait for is for the chicks to finish eating breakfast. We want to make sure that they're not, you know, being fed while we're right when we get up there. So we waited until they were done eating and then went up there. Annie was dive bombing us the entire time. She is an incredibly aggressive nest protector, and in her mind, she kind of scared away some potential predators.
Yes, Annie actually feels successful after this instance because 20 minutes and those giant predators went away. So anyways, although Annie and Grinnell are present and working to defend the nest, as you can see, Zika there is wearing a helmet to prevent any sort of injury if the falcons did come low. But also, luckily about this particular site is that there's the large concrete railing around that level of the campanile. So while the banding is taking place, Sean and Zika, our biologist, are able to be below where the falcons might be able to interact with them.
All right, our next question is, are the falcons capable of caring for 4 or more chicks? Definitely. They are. There's plentiful food in the Bay Area, so they could pretty easily care for 4. We haven't had them hatch a full clutch at this nest before, so there's a number of reasons why that could occur. There's the potential that there's still lingering environmental effects from DDT, and that might be hurting egg development, or there just could be a problem with fertilization or something
there's
like
all
that.
sorts of things that can happen during development that will prevent one egg from hatching. It might not have been as warm as some others. We don't know, but if 4 babies did hatch, Annie and Grinnell would be able to take care of those 4. All right, someone's asking about the yellow-footed baby.
So Yellowfoot, who also got a yellow band, which I was pretty happy about, is a male, but they're all males. There's just a lot of variation in chick leg coloration, and it changes over time as they age. But it's possible that this chick will just have really yellow, much more yellow than average legs than most peregrines.
All right, so now what's happening in the banding video needs to be noted because that looks like a very large tool. And what that is for, Zika is putting on the second leg band, which that band is a slightly larger band with much larger lettering on it. It has 4 digits that are unique to the peregrine falcons in this region. And those digits are large enough that they can be seen through binoculars from afar. But that kind of band, the aluminum one, is closed together by a tab that folds, whereas this one has a small rivet that holds the 2 sides of the band together. So the band is a circle that goes around the tarsus, and there's 2 tabs that the rivet gun just pushes those 2 tabs together and holds them together. So it's a big tool, but is for closing the band, not for doing anything to the bird itself.
All right. Why, Lynn, do you not wear gloves while banding?
So when you're handling raptors, although the raptor is slightly dangerous to you because they do have talons on their feet, the greater danger would be to have some sort of accident in which perhaps you, for example, and look, here's a good example. They have to look at the feathers to take, as I said before, the some measurements and then later genetic samples. Gloves would prevent you from being able to handle the bird safely. You need to have full feeling and, delicate maneuvering to handle the bird safely. So although there's a slight risk to the bander, if you have experience handling the birds, you know how to keep the dangerous part, which is those feet, away from yourself, and can handle them best that way.
And yes, the chicks are super soft. The down is an incredible insulator, so they're just super fluffy. They're not the fluffiest bird I've ever held. That honor goes to the American woodcock, which if I had a pillow made of woodcock feathers, I would be like the happiest person in the world. They are so fluffy.
Yes, which Sean knows about that because he did do a study about the migration patterns of American woodcock, in case you're wondering why he would have touched that species. Oh, so we have a little question here that maybe will, just because, hello from the Netherlands, his 7-year-old kid is a fan, so I just want to do a shout out. We're starting the Falcon naming contest. We've just opened it up now, and we're taking suggestions from social media, but we're also going to take suggestions from children this time around, and it's going to be through the Berkeley Public Library's website. Is that correct?
It's through our website.
Through our website, which is calfalcons.berkeley.edu. So I encourage your 7-year-old to submit any ideas for falcon names. But then, how did Annie react when you guys arrived up there?
She just started dive bombing us and screaming like crazy. She almost got me, to be honest. I should have ducked a little more. But yeah, she's a really good nest defender. So she was making sure that we were.
Yeah. All right. And it looks like Zika is starting on banding the next chick. So you can see she's carefully getting a hold of that, avoiding the feet. And then they're going to cover up the chick's head with just a soft cloth. Falcons are a very visual creature. And, in falconry, people use...
Oh, we just took a moment to zoom in here on
the reaction of the one who just got banded.
Yeah.
Seems reasonably relaxed still after that banding. Maybe confused. It's hard to speculate the inner life of a bird. But you can see there's that just soft cloth over the bird's head, so it's not being, it doesn't have all the input coming in from the eyes. It keeps them a lot calmer.
We had a, sorry, one.
All right.
I lost my question that I was going to click. Oh, here it is. So there's been one female in the past 3 clutches. Is there a sex bias in falcons or in general bird clutches? No, there really isn't. This is just total random chance.
Yeah. So bird genetics, male and females are differentiated in a way that's similar to how in humans male and females are differentiated, although flipped around. So in humans, if you have 2 different chromosomes, if you have an X and a Y in that location, you will have a male. Whereas with birds, it's if you have 2 of the same chromosomes, which
are Z's and W's.
Yeah. So if you have 2 of the same, you turn out to be a male when it's a bird. And the two different ones is you will become a female. So just like humans, it's a 50-50 shot, and it's just
kind of odd chance.
yeah, it's just a matter of chance that all our chicks have been male recently, except Poppy.
Yeah, Poppy and Larry are the only two females we've had.
Yeah.
And Zika mentioned while we were up on the tower that this was the first nest this year that she banded where all the chicks were the same sex. So, yeah, just kind of an odd coincidence.
Yeah. All right. So, question here. So, what's the estimated survival rate of chicks who have fledged in the past?
That is a really good question. Once you fledge, you're kind of what we consider the first year survival is to the next breeding season. It's really low. There's about 60% mortality in the first year. It usually comes from competition with or dangers from other predators, or really learning how to feed yourself. Hunting is a very complex activity, and so learning how to feed yourself is really difficult sometimes for chicks. So that's why. But once you get past that first year, survival is usually really, really high, and so there aren't many dangers to an adult peregrine falcon that they worry about after the first year.
All right, so here's a good question. At what age are they going to leave the nest?
42 days old. So we're expecting them to fledge, leave the nest on around May 28th to 31st. They will stick around in their parents' territory for another 6 to 8 weeks, sometimes a little longer, depending on the chick. And they'll kind of get flight school training and still be fed a little bit, but they'll kind of learn how to hunt from the parents. So they'll still stick around for about 2 months after they first leave the nest, and then they'll be off on their own to look for their own territories.
All right, so just because a few people have asked about this, they noted at least one banded pigeon was eaten, band and all. How does that get digested? So
the band actually does not get digested at all. Similar to other
yeah, people are kind of familiar with that owls leave behind owl pellets. Potentially, some of you have dissected owl pellets, in elementary school, and you get to see what the owl had eaten. Falcons do something very similar. Their stomach acid is a little different, so they'll often digest the bones, but there'll still be feathers or potentially fur from what they ate. That they cough up still, and the band would get coughed up with that pellet. And we have on our YouTube channel a few videos
of pellets
that are of both chicks and adults coughing up those pellets. So that band is somewhere in a pellet.
All right. Do falcons mate for lifeline?
So yes and no. So falcons, what they're really looking for is a territory that they feel that they're going to be able to raise chicks safely and provide enough food for them. So if a falcon finds a wonderful territory like the one on UC Berkeley campus here, they are going to want to stay there as long as they can. And so that means both the female and the male together want to stay in the same place as long as they can. So they will be in a monogamous relationship in the same location for a long time. But if for some reason the male or the female if something happens to them, if they got injured, or if another peregrine falcon moves in instead, the remaining individual on that territory will mate with the other bird that's living there typically.
So that leads to often a very long continuation of the same territory being used by a series of different birds with no actual break in breeding for that territory. So that's often what we see in peregrine falcons. And, hopefully when Annie and Grinnell are kind of done, we'll see that continue on with a new bird.
Yeah, we'll meet a new set of birds one day in the future. It should be noted, though, the individuals on the territory, even if their original mate leaves for some reason, they do have some say in who their new mate is going to be, because if they find that the potential mate that's trying to move into the territory is not suitable, they are able to aggressively make them leave the territory in hopes of a better mate to come along.
All right, so we have a question about our T-shirts. Yeah, so we're still selling T-shirts for our fundraiser. This year's design features the 3 chicks from last year, Sequoia, Poppy, and Redwood. So the band numbers on the T-shirt are Sequoia, Poppy, and Redwood's band numbers. They are still available. You can find the link on our website.
Yeah, I think the first set have just been shipped to the people who ordered them.
Yeah,
I'm excited to see what they look like.
If you order today, the second set will be sent out in a few days, and hopefully, fingers crossed, will be arriving roughly around fledging time.
All right, so someone is asking, because you were up there, you were able to hear what's going on. Were the chicks crying during this? Is it painful or scary to them?
They were not crying. They're generally pretty quiet and pretty docile when it comes to this process. That can vary very widely depending on the species of bird. But peregrines and raptors in general are often a lot more docile while being banded than you think, partially because they're kind of the top of the food chain, and they, are like, well, what's this thing messing with me? Doesn't it know that I have talents?
And also because while the banding is happening, that they can't see anything, that has a calming effect on a lot of birds. And then, is it painful? And the answer is
not at all.
No. They're holding them gently. The legs are being handled, and nothing is hurting them. And the little piece of feather that does get clipped is
it's made from the same material as your fingernail or your hair. So it's the exact same as you getting a haircut or your fingernails trimmed.
All right. So what happened to the unhatched egg?
I think Annie ate it. I think it happened off camera.
Okay.
I missed it. But someone mentioned that they might have seen it, and I totally missed it.
Yeah, which makes sense. Annie will take good care of the chicks and eggs, but eventually the unhatched egg will get broken from the, existing chicks as they get bigger and are moving around. And that broken egg, the eggshell contains lots of calcium, and so Annie will eat that.
So here's an interesting question. Why does Annie, when feeding the chicks, tease them sometimes? As they go for the food, she ends up eating herself. Often, actually, what Annie is doing is eating the parts that she doesn't want to feed the chick. You'll notice that often she's eating the feet or other parts that are more difficult for a chick to digest. So she might kind of pull a piece of meat off and offer it to the chick, but the chick actually is not capable of eating it, so she pulls it back and eats it herself.
Yeah, we have several clips of Annie trying to feed things to the chicks that the chicks just can't handle yet at the size they are, and after a minute or so will decide that she will eat it herself instead. How do falcons kill prey?
Oh man, great question.
That was a fun fact.
So peregrine falcons are a little bit different than most birds of prey, and that they basically kill by speed. So they hunt almost exclusively birds, and they're the fastest animal in the world because they go way up in the sky, identify the bird they're going to target, and then blast down in this crazy dive over 250 miles per hour. And what they're doing actually is they're balling up their fist and aiming to punch their target in the back of the head and instantly break its neck. So it's that's kind of what their goal is when they hunt.
So here's a question that I don't know the answer to because it's hard to know what's going on in a bird's head, but I don't know. Do you think the parents remember the banding ceremony happening each year?
I think they do. I think I've heard reports from some banders where it seems like as parents age, they get a little less aggressive about defending the chick during banding. Birds have excellent memories, and I can't imagine that they wouldn't at least remember that, people kind of come up there and are gone, at least.
All right, here's a quick one. I kind of got out of order on the questions here, but would you please note where to submit the suggested names?
So we have, if you have a kid suggesting names, please submit that to our website, calfalcons.berkeley.edu. We're collecting them there, and then we're going to go over them with the Berkeley Public Library and choose the finalist for that. And then the other places are on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Each there is a thread, which you can tell because it has a picture of Grinnell and the chicks graduating. And that is the correct thread to suggest a name, and upvote any that sound really fun. And we're, doing our usual caveat of no divisive, hurtful, or trolling names. We'll just kind of veto those.
But yeah, so we'll take the most highly liked or hearted or loved pictures from each social media platform and bring them into a final vote that we'll host on our website. But yeah, so just check our social media for details. And then let's see. All right, here's a question another one I don't know the answer to.
So
Sorry, I unclicked that. So which one is the youngest and who's the oldest?
We know the one with the yellow legs is one of the two earliest that hatched. And I'll have to look at the banding data about who was smallest, but I think the smallest chick is still the youngest.
Yeah, it's a little hard to know. They grow so fast. One of the chicks is 2 days younger than the other two, and for a while was noticeably smaller, but that bird's caught up to the others pretty completely at this point.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Here's a question. Do the parents teach them how to hunt?
And they do. This is kind of a wonderful thing about peregrine falcons. It's one of those things that you can almost relate to the peregrines with. Some things you really can't relate at all, but other things you can relate to. The parents, after the chicks leave the nest, spend a couple months teaching them to hunt. What they will start with is to midair hand off prey to the chicks. So the adults will catch something and will have it in their feet and try to fly slowly such that the chicks can come up and grab it.
And they'll often flip upside down and fly beneath the chick and try to hand it off that way.
And then they just keep, once the chicks are used to that kind of movement, they'll make it a little more and more difficult. The parents will start trying to fly faster. They will start dropping the prey for the young to try to catch, and then eventually they might even catch a prey item and while it's still alive, release it for the chick to try to capture itself. Yeah. And so that gives the young some practice at hunting before they have to move out and live on their own.
And that kind of ties in with this next question, which is what is their usual prey, and do they prefer birds or other prey? And peregrine falcons hunt almost exclusively birds. They occasionally will get small mammals, but that's very infrequent. So what's kind of interesting about peregrine falcons is the males and females are really significantly different sizes, so they often target different prey items. So females often go after larger animals like pigeons, whereas males will often go for smaller birds.
Yeah, and so here around campus, because there are so many pigeons, both Annie and Grinnell are often targeting pigeons, but we've seen all kinds of different prey come in, from woodpeckers to water birds. And overall, peregrine falcons have an incredibly varied diet when it comes to different kind of birds. There's records of them eating everything from hummingbirds to geese.
Yeah, but if you can imagine a peregrine taking out a goose, that's a heck of a thing. We were reaching the end of our banding video, so I switched it back to the beginning.
Yeah, are we back at the beginning or are we live?
I think we're back at the beginning.
Okay.
I lost my mouse cursor though. It's a little bright out here.
All right.
Let's see. Have poppy, redwood, and sequoia been spotted since they left the area last year?
Unfortunately, they have not, which isn't a huge surprise. Peregrine falcons around the Bay Area will often be seen in the Bay Area again, but it still is finding a needle in a continent-wide haystack eventually, because they could have gone any kind of distance. Zika mentioned to us just today that she had a bird they had recently banded in the Bay Area. A couple years later, end up nesting in Oregon?
Yeah, Eastern Oregon.
So
they can disperse pretty far.
Yeah, so we potentially might find them. It might not be for a few more years until they get their own territory, or they might have moved on to who knows where, and of course some percentage of them won't have made it, unfortunately.
This question, which I should feel because I neglected to mention Grinnell. He was also there during the nest banding. Grinnell is not quite as aggressive in defending the nests. He usually flies big circles around the tower. Annie is much larger and much more capable of defending the nest. So he provides support, but is often not right there yelling at us.
And we touched on this already, but what's the largest prey a peregrine could possibly catch? And could they get something bigger than pigeon? As we said, they can get geese.
Yeah.
So quite a bit bigger than pigeons. But are there any records of them getting things as big as herons?
There might
cranes?
be a sandhill crane record.
Yeah.
I'd have to look that up. But
I do know that falconers, which are people who are hunting with falcons, they will target larger things, but of course they are assisting the falcon to some extent once the prey item is knocked to the ground. So it's a little bit different.
This is a really great question. Do Annie and Grinnell learn more with each brood, or is it all instinct? They do learn with each brood, especially for kind of flight training. You'll see them encourage, when they first fly, you'll see the parents encouraging the birds, the chicks, to fly in certain directions because they know that's where the safer landing spots are. So that's something that comes with experience, and it definitely becomes easier for the parents over time as they get multiple broods under their wings.
And it's younger falcons. And falcons, when it's their very first nesting year, are often noticeably struggling more than an older pair. Younger falcons have a more difficult time potentially getting food for the young, knowing how often to get food. Some young male falcons, take a while to, understand how much effort it takes. And the first connecting. All right. I think we're still online.
All right. So the next question is, I'm just being picky, but does the old poop not bother the birds like it bothers me? Actually, this kind of leads to a really interesting question. We just had a red-shouldered hawk fly over here. the poop is actually one of the things that peregrines look for to know where a nest site has been successful. So they look for kind of this whitewashing, this stain on surface to know that that's a good territory. So often when birds are scouting for new territories, they really keep an eye out for that really bright white poop marker.
Yeah, which kind of leads to a related question here. Do the irises have, iris being the word for a peregrine falcon chick, do they have fleas or bugs on them? And these do not. Is that correct? Did you see any parasites?
I didn't see any parasites. Birds do get parasites, often feather mites, or there's a species of fly called a flat fly that parasitizes birds. And interestingly, for feather mites, pretty much each bird has its own specific species of feather mite that is unique to that bird, that species. So there is a peregrine falcon feather mite out there that's specific to peregrine falcons.
A close coevolution. And so, yeah, it's totally possible for them to get parasites like the feather mites, just like any other animal is able to get that. But that's actually part of the reason the peregrine falcons nest in the kind of places they do, because people often ask about this like cold-looking gravel nest. And, you know, for one, the cliff sides are an amazing place to remain safe from other animals, but also not having a stick nest means that it's harder for parasites to persist in the nest site through time. So it actually helps prevent parasites from parasitizing the chicks. Here's a good question. How do you know the legs won't get thicker and outgrow the band?
That is a great question.
And we think about that quite a bit.
Yeah, the window for banding falcon is really tight because you want the bird to have fully grown legs that aren't going to get bigger. But you don't want it to be so big that it's going to be able to run around and perhaps hurt itself when you're trying to band it. And that's the key thing, is we want to avoid hurting these animals at all costs.
So, luckily, in the case of the peregrine falcons and raptors in general, the very first thing that reaches full size is their legs.
Yes.
And that is partially because those feet are such an important part of the anatomy for hunting and for keeping that bird alive and protected. And so the banding takes place within this window when we know the feet are totally full grown and that the feathers, though, are not grown. And it's notable, a lot of people don't realize this about birds, that a bird only grows feathers once a year, and those feathers are incredibly essential, of course, to their lifestyle, but that means the moment that they leave the nest and start learning to fly, that means they have that year's feathers. And that means they have to be full-sized, or else their feathers are not going to fit them a year from there. So any bird that is the kind that leaves the nest in flight, that bird is full-sized when it does that and is not going to grow further into the future.
All right. Is there a place for the public to look at the data for each banded bird? For our banded birds, yes. We have the data on our website in the FAQ section. We have all of our band information. For the broader, like all birds, you can't access like all the data as far as I know. Like, yeah, I think it's privately held, or
I believe you have to make a formal request as a researcher to get that level of data from the bird banding laboratory. Although I do encourage people to the other way around. If for some reason you find a bird with a band, either you find one that has gotten injured, for example, and are able to read that 9-digit band, to report that to the USGS Bird Banding Laboratory, which you can Google. Or if you're able to see one of those bands with the big digits on them from afar, you can also report that there. So So yeah, you unfortunately can't look at the full database from the bird banding lab, but you can contribute data if you see a bird out in the wild with these bands.
Yep, and it's incredibly valuable data.
In some cases, if you see a picture of a bird that's banded on Instagram that you can see its number,
yeah,
I recommend messaging the photographer and asking them to submit information to the bird banding lab, because that helps us understand the survival and movement of these birds.
All right. So this is referring to a kind of a cool thing that birds do, is that when they're incubating the egg, they lose all the feathers pretty much underneath or on their chest.
Yeah, so they lose the down feathers.
They lose the down feathers. So there's going to be this big patch of bare skin called the brood patch. And it gets all kind of highly vascularized and is great for transmitting warmth directly to the eggs. So the question is, do the feathers on the chests of nesting parents grow back before the next breeding season? And yes, they do. So the timing of molt is that most birds undergo a molt directly after the breeding season. So an adult bird will grow in new feathers over the course of usually over the winter or fall. Depends on the species, of course, but they'll have a full set of feathers over the non-breeding season, and then they lose those downy feathers right before they are incubating eggs.
All right, so we have a question here that is, so is there a way to put a tracker in the bands to help determine where the chicks go? And now there are studies out there that are tracking things like, peregrine falcons as they move around through satellite transmitters. But the problem is there's some size restrictions when it comes to that. Now you can only put on a transmitter that is, what's the weight limit?
The very maximum is 5%, but it's much more commonly recommended to be about 2.5% of the body weight of the bird.
Yeah, because you can't have the transmitter be very large. And now you can put on a transmitter on a peregrine falcon in the fashion of, it kind of looks like a little backpack, and people have done that for studies. But as we talked about, the legs are the first thing to get to full size on these chicks, but the rest of their body is still going to grow for a few more weeks. So you can't fit the chicks with a backpack like that would have a satellite transmitter in it. You can only really do that plausibly with adults. And then for the leg band transmitters, that is just such a small area that right now there aren't satellite transmitters that would fit in the leg band particularly well, effectively. That technology we just don't have quite yet.
And that leads to kind of one of the big questions that we can answer from that tracking data, which we don't have a great answer for, is will all these chicks survive? We're reasonably certain that they will survive to fledging. There's very, very little threats to them in the nest. There's a potential that like a great horned owl could attack the nest, but that's really unlikely. Annie and Grinnell are pretty good at defending the nest from predators. Once they leave the nest, though, that's when things get a lot more dicey. There's risks to learning to fly. There's things around with glass windows that are dangerous. There's cars. There's all sorts of kind of dangers out there. So it's unlikely that all three chicks will survive to adulthood. It's possible, but it's not probably not going to happen just based on percentages.
All right. Are you going to clean the cameras?
I wiped off the cameras a little bit when I was up there. And so hopefully they're a little better than they were. But we can't really dilly-dally too much while we're banding the birds because it's a stressful event for the parents, and we want to minimize our time up there. So they'll be heavily cleaned next off season, hopefully right before breeding season begins. But I think this is the last time we're going to be up there until cleaning time.
Yeah, which is middle of winter when the falcons are not around. All right. Let's see. Then just a quick basic question. Will we post this to the website so we can watch it again? And we will. Yeah, we regularly are posting events we do, clips that we take from the falcons showing interesting behaviors, and all of that to our YouTube channel and our website. So all of those resources are available. Let's see. Hang on. Oh, here's a question that people have asked about. Does the nest box get overheated when the weather is warm? I saw the chicks panting a lot the other day.
That's a great question, and it's something that we definitely kind of consider when it comes to nest box locations and all that, because overheating is a danger to chicks. Luckily, it's not a huge concern here in the Bay Area. It doesn't get super hot. And peregrine falcons are found all around the world, so they're used to nesting in deserts and really warm areas. That said, panting is one of the behavioral responses that chicks and birds will do to heat. So that's an indicator that they're warm. Right now, they're of the age where they're going to be able to easily find shade. If it's warm.
You'll often see on the warm days during the afternoon when the nest box isn't shaded, you'll see the chicks kind of sneak into the corners of the nest box where there's shade, or actually underneath the shadow of the camera itself. But yeah, it does not get so hot that is a problem to the chicks. They do pant to try to keep themselves cool. They'll often open up their wings to keep themselves cool or stick their legs out to help with that. But they are not in any danger really at this age of not being able to thermoregulate themselves.
All right. Hi, Danielle. This is my lab mate. Are there any Bay Area specific challenges, fog, climate, etc., that these peregrines face? That's a really good question. And
I think the biggest danger is that the Bay Area is a densely populated place with lots of people and lots of traffic.
Yep, and lots of peregrines. It's kind of getting closer to saturation for peregrine territories, so there's a lot of competition. We've already seen some of the other monitored nests in the area have, in the last couple of years, have turnover where one of the parents or one of the mated pairs was driven out, and so that's a challenge for individuals. However, the benefit of the Bay Area is that these birds they don't have to migrate. They can stay here all year round, which is a bit of a rarity for peregrine falcons, and is a huge boost to survival. Migration is one of the most dangerous times of year, so the benefit of not being able to move is an incredible boost to their survival.
All right, here's a question I don't necessarily know the answer to, but I know a couple fun facts about falcon sleep. How long do Annie and Grinnell sleep? Do the chicks sleep longer?
That is a phenomenal question, and I don't know the answer really.
All right, so we do see Annie and Grinnell spending quite a bit of their day snoozing when they're not hunting or feeding the kids. But falcons and a lot of birds and a lot of animals, in fact, they do what is called unihemispheric sleep. So they're sleeping on one side of the brain at a time. So a lot of times you'll see Annie or Grinnell on camera snoozing, and you just see them with one eye closed and the other eye open so they can sleep with one side of the brain and be somewhat vigilant on the other side. So we see on the camera Annie and Grinnell, they'll spend most of the evenings asleep, and they'll take naps during the day. But to what degree you'd call any of that sleeping in the same way as we do, since they're keeping vigilant much of the time, it's a little tricky to answer exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Okay, here's a good question. When will they step out of the nest, and what would happen if they did it too soon?
If they do it too soon, not much would happen. They'd probably make it back up into the nest.
Well, in the case of our
yes.
deluxe suite on top of
deluxe apartment in the sky.
Yeah, there's a pretty wide balcony that's around there. So if the chicks hop out of the box, they're able to hop back in. They're not in danger of falling, although if this was the case of a narrower cliff ledge, or say, for example, there's the Peregrine Falcons nesting on the Richmond Bridge, if they hopped out of the nest too soon, before they were ready to fly, there is a danger of falling. So that is why our young ones are still sticking to the box pretty closely.
Yeah. Last year we had the first kind of foray out of the nest box at about this age. So we'll probably be seeing something relatively similar. We'll see kind of the first popping out of the box in the next few days.
All right, so then this is a tricky question. So is the Mediterranean climate like we have in the San Francisco Bay Area, is that the best for falcons?
And it's a little hard to answer, because if a bird is nesting and successfully breeding in a place, you can consider that to be a successful climate and location. And so then in the case of peregrines, they're breeding from the tundra all the way to like the hottest deserts in the world. So if they're succeeding in a location, it might be an all right climate. The Mediterranean climate certainly offers some really nice benefits.
It does offer some advantages, but there are places with other advantages. For example, peregrine falcons nesting in the far north might be facing less competition in the area, and they might also have a kind of different mix of prey available that could be a positive thing. So there's good and bad elements to anywhere that they might live, but the Mediterranean habitat is pretty nice. It does have advantages for the falcons.
All right. This is a good question. So we just mentioned that peregrine falcons are found all over the world, and that means that there's a lot of different subspecies of peregrine falcons. So I think there's 16?
I don't know how many subspecies there are.
I would say somewhere between 10 and 20, maybe more. But there's a really good number of subspecies, which are kind of a distinct kind of population of birds.
Yeah, you consider something a subspecies if they are genetically distinct enough to be recognizable and they occupy some different region or niche than others do. But that's why it's hard to say exactly where the line is with subspecies. But, so with the Bay Area falcons, we have a pretty good idea about the subspecies generally being anatom, but also being kind of a weird mix, because 50 years ago, there were only 2 nesting pairs of peregrine falcons in California because the species had suffered so much from the effects of pesticides. And so to bring the falcons back, people did a lot of effort with captive breeding programs and reintroducing them. And the stock they used for the reintroduction program was largely anatom falcons, because that's the kind that falconers in the region have.
We're going to take
we're going to
5 seconds to relocate next to an outlet, because I'm about to run out of batteries. So interestingly, the bird banding lab determines what color the band should be based on the region and subspecies. So in the West, all anatom birds get black bands.
Yeah, so we're assuming these birds are pretty much anatom birds, and that's why they're getting the black bands. Okay. Someone's earlier question about why are the prey headless so often?
That's a great question. And it's a little bit of a macabre answer, but the brain of a bird is often the most nutritionally valuable for a predator to eat.
It's highly caloric.
Highly caloric, and contains a lot of nutrients that are necessary for a bird to live, or any predator to live. And then also they are difficult to feed to chicks. You can't really feed a head to a chick. So that's why the adults usually eat the head before they bring them to the chick.
All right. How do the chick's feathers feel? Are they fuzzy or fluffy? We got that earlier, but I think
they're so fluffy.
I saw it a couple more times.
They're really, really fluffy.
Yeah, because so what they have grown in is their insulation feathers. So that's down feathers, and so that is designed to be good at trapping, keeping them warm. So it is fuzzy, and they're in the process, though, of growing in the outer feathers that will be brown for the juvenile birds and then gray in the adults that you recognize. So there are underneath those fuzzy feathers right now the very little bases of those bigger feathers coming in. And then I had originally read this and just, do the chicks have feeling in their feathers?
That's a really good question. So generally, no. It depends on the type of feather and how it's kind of connected to the body and what state it's in. As they're growing, they have a sheath that's full of blood vessels that helps nourish the feather growth. So the tips of the feather, then what you consider to be a normal feather, no, that's all dead tissue, same as our hair or our fingernails. But it's
which
connected.
Isn't to say they can't tell if it's being touched, just like you can tell your hair is being touched.
Yep, it's often connected to very sensitive nerve endings, and
but
so
the feather itself is.
Yeah. So they can feel when you're touching their feathers, but the feather itself does not have nerves or anything in it.
Yeah, but then as the feather is growing in, though, it's connected to a blood supply and does have feelings. Let's see. Do falcons eat food other than birds? And rarely. We've seen one instance where the chicks had found a rat, which actually concerned us a little bit. Usually if they're eating something other than birds, it's because they just found a good opportunity to do so. And that means if it's a dead rat, it might have been a poisoned rat, so that worried us a little bit. But like most wild animals, they are opportunists, and so if a prey item does seem easily available to catch, they'll often go for it. But when they're actively hunting, when they're normally hunting, they're targeting birds, and almost all of us are eating birds other than the occasional fluke.
So this is about the campanile, and I guess pairs with another question. Is it necessary to have the lights on at night, and can the falcons be active 24/7 in the dark and daylight? The light does not appear to bother Annie and Grinnell at all. One thing to keep in mind when thinking about this nest is that they chose this nesting location before we were able to add any infrastructure or anything to it. So this is the place they wanted to use. So it's kind of like they chose it and appear to not care that much.
Yeah, and they're an urban bird. They're used to it. It is notable that through large windows, having lights staying on through large windows is a danger to attract at night through those large windows and can be a problem. But the campanile, it's a different situation. But it's notable that we don't have control over the lights. The lights are kind of the way they are.
Yeah, they're really kind of built into the system. They did, we're able to turn off the light that's closest to the nest box at night. So that one is not shining straight in. But then kind of continuing on with this question, can the falcons be active 24/7? And so this is kind of where we kind of come back to where we talked about where falcons are, and they are found in the high Arctic. So are in places where there's 24 hours of daylight a day. And I don't know what their hunting strategy is there. Do you?
They are active much of the day because there is daylight available much of the day. Again, even when falcons are sleeping, they're still slightly conscious and slightly aware. So they're fine with both. And then do they hunt at night? And occasionally they will.
Mm-hmm. We saw Grinnell bring in a bird like in the middle of the night last year.
Yeah. And part of the reason is songbirds, migratory songbirds often migrate at night because under the cover of darkness is helpful. Nighttime, there's less turbulent winds. So small songbirds, since they migrate at night, that's a good opportunity for falcons to look for opportunities to catch something as well. So they can hunt at night and occasionally will, although since they're a very visual animal, they're usually going to be hunting during the day.
Yeah. And it had this answer or comment, which their falcons eat bats. Yes. That I totally spaced on bats being a prey for some.
Oh yeah,
some
that's true. We were
peregrines.
saying mostly birds.
Yeah, bats
but
are.
It's mostly flying species.
Yeah, because it also includes insects and dragonflies, like dragonflies and butterflies. There's a group of falcons that just fledged in the Bay Area that have been hunting. The chicks have been trying and not really succeeding, but trying to hunt butterflies.
Yep, they've been learning on butterflies, and occasionally we'll catch. There's moths up on the campanile. Occasionally we'll catch the juveniles even before they can fly, walking around going for butterflies. But yeah, thanks for the correction. We said that they mostly hunt birds, but it's more accurate to say they mostly hunt flying animals.
There we go.
All right. How many people are on the roof to band?
So we had 4 people up there, although 2 people hung back and really weren't there at the nest box. But we have 2 people from facility services and UCPD that led us up into the building and kind of get us all the way up there. And then we had Zika, the bander, and then I was assisting Zika.
Yeah, you were assisting Zika, helping to make sure notes got taken, helping to make sure the adults left Zika alone. And then, so what organization are you with? And the answer is we're both ornithologists. In my professional life, I work for the Institute for Bird Populations, and you are a graduate student and almost PhD from UC Berkeley, but really what we're doing this, we're just volunteering our time for this. So we're essentially just from Cal Falcons, and yeah, so we do the T-shirt sales to raise funds, but that is just going to maintaining the cameras, and then we're donating those funds to local educational programs. We're hoping to donate binoculars to the local public libraries soon. But yeah, so we're just with Cal Falcons. We're volunteering.
Yep. So in the Central Bay Area, don't think they see peregrine falcons in Concord, Antioch, or Martinez. There is at least a territory in Martinez, because that's where Grinnell is from originally. He was banded in, I think, 2013 as a juvenile bird in Martinez. So there is a territory there. I don't know where it is. Lots of the peregrine falcon nests are a lot more vulnerable than the campanile, so they keep a pretty kind of close lid on where the actual nest locations are for many of the birds in the Bay Area.
All right, and then here's, I said that Annie and Grinnell leave during the winter. Where do they go? And so they do not go far. They usually are not spending time up on the campanile during the winter. They're not up at the nest box regularly, but they are still staying around in Berkeley. They spend quite a bit of time in downtown Berkeley, roosting on some of the taller buildings. We've seen them hunting near the bay, but in the winter they're in the area, they're still on their territory, but they're not up by the nest box. All right, and then someone just saying, can we get a glimpse of the falcons again?
Yeah, I'll fix that.
Yeah, although that can be, we'll just loop back on the video.
Yeah.
All right. Back around. There's the chicks again.
So if the chick is sick, will we help it? Generally, our policy is no, that we will treat this nest as a wild and natural nest, with the exception of if there is a human element to what is perhaps a danger to the chicks. So if someone had broken into the campanile and was up there, we would interfere. Or if there's a drone flying nearby, we'd contact the UCPD to kind of get rid of the drone. But these are wild birds, and this is a wild nest, and for the most part, we're going to treat it as a kind of a privilege to kind of peek into the lives of a wild bird.
Yeah. All right. So, do you know the answer to this? The UC Davis Health building, they have a camera on some peregrine falcons that are there. They're bigger than the Cal chicks. I think just because they hatched a little earlier.
They hatched the same day, actually.
Oh, they hatched the same day.
So
I wonder then if they're all females.
They might have all females.
Yeah, since males are quite a bit smaller. Were they banded? I
don't know. I think they banned the UC Davis chicks, but I don't know for sure. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So most of the chicks in California, the Santa Cruz Predatory Bird Research Group, where our falcon biologists doing the banding here, they try to band most of the falcons in the region. That doesn't mean they are able to get to all of them, but yeah, so I don't know, but my guess is that they would want to or hope to.
Yeah.
Let's see.
We should do a follow-up.
Yeah, so follow-up to the previous question. We were saying if they get sick, we're not going to intervene in their natural lives. But what about the fledge? If they hit the ground, do we help them?
And that is a definite yes. There are a lot of dangers to a grounded peregrine falcon.
And they're human-caused dangers.
Like dogs or traffic, people walking around, windows, all sorts of human-caused dangers. So if the chick hits the ground during the fledge, we'll collect it, take it to a local wildlife rehab to be checked out, make sure it's all right, and then take it back up to the tower.
Yeah, so that...
Oh, we got an answer to that.
Gives them... someone knows the answer about the UC Davis Health chicks will be banded. They just aren't quite yet. And so I bet that's going to be happening soon. And yeah, thanks for that answer. Let's see. Oops. Oh, but we can address that one too.
So names, there are posts on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And after this broadcast is over, I will add those links to the website. But that's where you should submit names and vote on your favorites. There's also, if you have names from kids, there's a direct link on the website to where the kid name contest comes in.
Yeah, so what we'll be doing is we'll be taking the top most highly liked, favorited, hearted entries from social media, and we'll be putting those together for kind of a final vote of those top finalists plus some of the kids' suggestions. The ones we're leaving it to the Berkeley Public Library to choose the top names for those.
So this is a question: will we be doing Fledge Watch this year? Yes, we will. Campus is still technically closed to the public. So I can't be like, everybody come and hang out for Fledge Watch because technically campus is closed, but we will have volunteers. We're coordinating with UCPD and other campus people to have access to the campus. And we'll be keeping an eye on the chicks.
All right. So, do you ever have to use rope access to get to certain scrapes in order to do banding? I notice this guy, and it's actually this girl, the director of Santa Cruz Predatory Bird Research, Zika, is a girl, but he notices this is a climbing type helmet, and the answer is yes. A lot of peregrine falcon nests are much less accessible than our deluxe campanile nest, and so Zika is a skilled climber, and they will often climb up to nest sites. And even a lot of the urban nest sites, you need to use rope access, because a lot of the urban nest sites are not the kind of place that has easy access anyways.
And and Zika has kind of often mentioned how nice it is to band at the campanile because it's so easy to access. So wire measurements taken several times. Zika's actually taking a couple of different measurements usually.
It is worth noting that we've
also cycled through this video
been on
a few
repeat.
times.
But she's taking all different measurements on each individual, but a lot of the measurements she's measuring, some measurements include the tarsus, or what looks like the wrist, and the hallux claw, which is the, thumb claw. And so it does look a little bit like some measurements are being taken multiple times, although she will, when taking measurements, sometimes do it twice quick just to double check that things are correct.
I think we mentioned this earlier, but it's really just individual variation in the chick. There's not really any link that's in the literature between leg color and any characteristic.
Well, males do tend to have yellower feet than females, but all three of these individuals are male. Yeah. So it's just that the one, that yellow foot there, is just a little yellower than average.
And the leg color does change over time in the chick's life.
Does the mother ever reject the chicks after they're banded? And I think this is actually maybe a good myth to be busting right now. There's a common myth that if you interfere with a baby bird or the nest, then the mother will reject the young for some reason. And that is completely untrue. It takes a lot of work to raise an egg to a chick of this size, and the parent is not just going to take that lightly and abandon their young. So I don't think there are any instances in which a mother peregrine has ever rejected a chick after being banded, because a mother peregrine has invested a lot. They have absolutely no reason to feel that they are threatened after being banded. Now, in the event that there's kind of a different sort of continuous problem, if there is interference for an extended period of time such that the adult feels that it can't safely return, then there could be a problem. But since banding is short term, how long were you guys up there? About a half hour to get all three chicks banded? That is, that's not enough time for the falcon to feel that it is unable to come back. But again, so since that myth exists, a lot of people, when they find a baby songbird that hit the ground, likely because it was learning to fly, they will feel that what they need to do is try to raise it, because otherwise the adult's going to abandon it. And that is not the right thing to do, because a lot of the times if you find a baby bird on the ground, it's because it took its first flight maybe a little too soon, was not ready. And all you need to do is, if you can find the nest, just put it back up into the nest so it can take another try later. Or if you can't find the nest, just put it up somewhere high that seems like it would be safe from things like dogs or cats or people. And the parent will find its baby. Baby birds are loud for a reason. The parent is watching out and will come and feed it. So important myth to bust.
Yeah.
If you find a baby bird and it doesn't, have an obvious injury, it's probably fine. Get it out of the way of predators and it'll try to fly again later, and its parents will keep taking care of it.
Yeah. So what would we recommend for ornithology novices to get more involved in conservation, rehab, or research? That's a great question. There's a few really great citizen science organizations. If you're
Community science organizations.
It's been changed to community science. I recommend, the Audubon Society is a great place to start if you're a novice to birding.
There are many chapters of the Feminist Bird Club,
Mm-hmm.
which is designed specifically to be an inclusive environment for learning to do things like birds and get involved with that. One really fun thing that I enjoy is there is a website, an app and program called iNaturalist, and you can submit any sort of nature observations you make in your day-to-day life. If you see an insect that's interesting, a plant that's interesting. And what's amazing about the app is you can actually take the picture and it will help you identify what it is. It has an algorithm that will be able to narrow it down to genus or even species sometimes. So you can just submit your pictures, and that helps you learn to identify the things in your neighborhood. That data is useful to scientists to understand how widespread species are. Then getting involved in things like wildlife rehabilitation, that depends on what region you're in, but a lot of areas do have wildlife rehabilitation centers that you can volunteer at. And then one more big community science project is ebird.org, and that allows you to submit, if you are out birding, you can submit all of your birding observations, and similar to iNaturalist, scientists can use that to get an idea of the number and distribution and the movements and the timing that migratory species arrive. And I've actually, in my own research, used eBird data quite a bit. So that's a fantastic program. So there's lots of ways to get involved.
Yep.
Bay Area also has the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory that is not taking new volunteers for a little while, but does have a large volunteer community that you can get involved with in the future.
Yeah, I would just recommend looking around online, and there's often a lot of really amazing organizations out there. I have a question about nest structure. So, do peregrine falcons always have a nest on pebbles? I saw falcons in Chicago made a nest on a window ledge that used pebbles. When we build our nest boxes, we almost always have it as a base of gravel because it comes as close as possible to mimicking the natural nest substrate, which is often a cliff, a little shallow cave in a cliff or something like that. So they naturally nest on rocks, and so we kind of are kind of aiming to mimic that kind of shallow cave with kind of a loose rocky or soil base.
Yeah, and so in nature they're on nest scrapes and all sorts of rocky cliffsides. So, in theory they could be using just the totally bare ground, but the pebbles help to keep the eggs from rolling out, and it helps with drainage in the nest box. So it makes a slightly better location than if we just left it empty. All right.
Do we add microchips or any other tracker to the bird?
The chicks are not microchipped. Their unique band is going to serve the same purpose essentially as an RFID chip might serve, in a pet, that, you use that when you refine them, you can scan it and get, its identification. So, the band has a unique number. If you'd be close enough to scan an RFID tag, you are close enough to read the band number. And then any sort of other tracking devices, we did bring up, some research will do satellite tracking, and the technology just isn't quite there to be able to have the birds carry a tracker on the band itself. That's a little too small, and the chicks are still growing in their body, although the feet are not growing, so you couldn't put on the backpack style transmitter.
Yeah. So I think we're kind of running out of questions.
Yeah. Well, and we're well over our...
We're over our hour, I guess. So I guess we'll just end with that and say, wanted to thank everyone for attending our Q&A, and we'll have more in the future in the as the fledge watch starts up and we talk about the chicks fledging. And yeah, thank you all for all of your support. And please go submit names to the naming contests. And I'm excited to see what you all come up with.
All right, and then here we can just end on this note. They're visiting Berkeley in September. Anything Cal Falcony to see? And the answer is they'll probably have wrapped up the nesting season by then, and the kids will have moved out. But Annie and Grinnell, they do live in Berkeley year-round, so keep your eyes open. Maybe you'll run into them downtown.
And also, September is an excellent time to go visit the Marin Headlands north of San Francisco and see the raptor migration from Hawk Hill. You might always get lucky and see a peregrine falcon up there.
Yeah, it's true. And more peregrine falcons are migrating through that part of the Bay Area every year. All right. Thanks, everyone. And we'll be posting this video on our YouTube channel, and you can find it on our website if you want to take a look at it again. And I didn't quite see, was there a question by someone who is hearing impaired that wanted to see answers? Okay, well, I want to mention too this banding video, and we'll type this as well, this banding video. We're going to add subtitles to just the video itself that explains what's going on. All right, so we'll put that in into comments, and then we'll sign off.
All right, thanks everyone.
All right. And